Cold has always been the silent enemy of armies. Long before modern insulation, electric heaters, or central heating, military engineers were forced to solve one problem above all others: how to keep soldiers alive, alert, and functional in freezing conditions using almost nothing. One of the most effective solutions they developed has quietly disappeared from civilian knowledge, yet it still outperforms many modern heating habits when applied correctly. Now, this method isn't about producing more heat. It's really about trapping and managing the heat you already have, and honestly, it works just as well in a spare bedroom, a garage workshop, or an RV parked in winter conditions. What follows is a direct explanation of the method, how it was used, and how you can apply it tonight with materials you already own. This military warmth method relied on layered dead air zones, not heat sources. The core of this forgotten technique comes from World War I and II cold weather encampments. Military tents weren't warm because of stoves alone. In fact, many tents had no active heat source at all. Their warmth came from controlled layering that created multiple trapped air spaces. These spaces, often called dead air zones, dramatically slowed heat loss from the human body. The military discovered that one thick layer was far less effective than several thin layers separated by air. Air, when trapped and unmoving, is one of the best insulators available. Soldiers slept inside tents that had an outer canvas, an inner liner, and sometimes an improvised third layer made from blankets or spare fabric. Each layer created a barrier where heat slowed down before escaping. In civilian homes today, most folks rely on heating the entire space. The military approach instead reduced the size of the space that needed to be warm and wrapped it intelligently. Soldiers applied this system inside tents to protect the sleeping zone only. Rather than heating the entire tent, soldiers focused on the sleeping area. They hung fabric liners inside the tent walls, creating a smaller inner chamber. This reduced the volume of air that needed to stay warm and prevented cold air from flowing freely across the sleeping body. This same principle translates perfectly to bedrooms. Instead of trying to warm the entire room, you isolate the bed space. A canopy-style setup using blankets or thick curtains hung from the ceiling, or a simple frame recreates the inner liner of a military tent. The temperature inside that micro-space can be several degrees warmer without any added heat source. Folks often dismiss this as primitive, but, measured tests from historical military manuals actually show heat retention improvements of up to 40% when liners were properly installed. One of the most overlooked parts of the military system was the ground barrier. Soldiers were taught that cold rises from below faster than it enters from the sides. Canvas tents sat directly on frozen earth, yet soldiers stayed functional because they layered the ground. Straw, wooden planks, spare clothing, and folded blankets were placed under sleeping bags. This prevented conductive heat loss into the ground. The body loses heat fastest when pressed against cold surfaces. In a modern bedroom, this translates to insulating beneath the bed. Placing a thick rug, foam mat, or layered blankets under the bed frame reduces heat loss into concrete or cold flooring. In garages and RVs, this step alone can dramatically change nighttime comfort. Even a folded moving blanket or cardboard layered beneath a sleeping surface mimics what armies did in the field. Another key detail was airflow control. Soldiers were trained to block drafts before lighting fires or using stoves. Canvas flaps were sealed with extra fabric, and gaps near the ground were packed with clothing or gear. In modern spaces, this means addressing doors, vents, and gaps first. In a bedroom, rolling a towel along the door base recreates the same effect as a packed canvas flap. In garages, hanging a heavy curtain between the work area and the garage door isolates cold surfaces. In RVs, blocking cab areas and unused sections creates a smaller heat-retaining zone. This is not about comfort tricks. It is about applying battlefield-level efficiency to civilian spaces. One reason this method worked so well is that military liners reduced condensation. When cold air hits warm skin, it creates moisture, which then steals heat through evaporation. The layered system allowed moisture to escape slowly without direct exposure to cold surfaces. In modern use, breathable layers really matter. Avoid using plastic sheets directly near the body. Instead, use cotton, wool, or fabric blankets for the inner layer and denser materials for the outer barrier. This setup mirrors how military tents were designed with breathable liners rather than sealed enclosures. When applied correctly, this method prevents the damp chill that often makes cold rooms unbearable, even when heaters are running. Military mechanics often worked inside large tents in freezing conditions. Instead of heating the entire space, they built smaller work enclosures around critical equipment. Fabric walls were suspended from ropes or poles, enclosing the workspace. In a garage, this same approach works immediately. Just hang moving blankets or old duvets to create a smaller work bay. Place insulation beneath your feet and, block drafts at the door seams. The difference is noticeable within minutes, even without turning on a heater. This is why soldiers could work for hours in sub-zero conditions without modern insulation or heating technology. RVs suffer from the same weaknesses as military transport tents: thin walls, metal frames, and constant air leaks. The military solution was internal compartmentalization. Crews slept inside fabric cocoons suspended within the vehicle shell. In an RV, closing off unused areas and adding hanging fabric layers along walls recreates this system. Reflective insulation placed behind fabric layers adds another barrier, but the key remains trapped air, not reflective surfaces alone. Many RV owners waste energy trying to heat the entire vehicle. The military approach teaches you to shrink the heated zone and protect it properly. Modern heating assumes energy abundance. Military warmth assumes scarcity. That mindset created systems that are still unmatched for efficiency. By reducing heat loss rather than increasing heat output, soldiers conserved fuel and stayed alive. Applying this today reduces energy bills, increases comfort, and keeps spaces usable even during power outages. It is not nostalgia. It's proven engineering, refined under extreme conditions. Take one room, one corner of a garage, or maybe one section of an RV. Create layers, block airflow, insulate beneath you, shrink the space you expect to be warm. Treat it like a field shelter, not a modern open-plan room. This method does not require buying new products. It just requires understanding how heat behaves. Once applied, the difference is immediate and measurable. Your body heat becomes the primary heat source again, exactly as military planners intended. This warmth hack was never meant to be forgotten. It simply fell out of civilian use when cheap energy replaced careful design. Yet history shows that the most resilient systems are the simplest ones. If you value historical knowledge that still works in the modern world, this is exactly the kind of lesson worth preserving. If this guide added something new to your understanding of military history and practical survival, subscribe to Living Through the Seasons, share this with someone who still struggles with cold spaces, and keep these lessons alive.